Okay, good morning, students. Professor Bell here with you to look at the physical geography of Sub-Saharan Africa. So if you could, go ahead and open your textbooks up to page or chapter 6 and then dig in on that first map of the chapter. And we're going to use the first few maps and pages as we go through the physical geography, climate, environment, and things of this nature regarding this unique region of the planet. Just giving you a quick overview, just a few points on the map so that you have a frame of reference. Obviously, you have the Sahara Desert here, and I'm going to show you how big it is in just a moment, but of course you can use your linear scales down here if you'd like. But we'll look at the size of this desert. We'll also look at this thing called the Sahel. You can see this on the screen, the Sahel. We'll look at the Ethiopian highlands, this Great Lakes district right in here. We'll look at the Congo Basin and the rainforest, second largest rainforest on the planet. In the southern region down here, we'll look at the Great Escarpment and Kalahari Desert and some of the other features. So the Horn of Africa is out here. We'll see some quite unique physical geography, of course, but certainly human geography as well. And the geography is, of course, very diverse across this this vast region. So by scale alone, let's show you that this is from a site called the True Size Of, and so this is by scale how the lower 48 continental United States looks like in comparison to, say, just the northern part of Africa around the Sahara Desert. So clearly the Sahara Desert is bigger than our country, aside from Alaska and Hawaii. And so this is the second largest continent in the world. There's a lot of people, a lot of diversity here, and it's been too simplified in the past of Africa's a poor country. Golly, I get so tired of hearing ridiculous statements like that aren't even close to becoming reality. It's a continent full of about 54 countries, I believe. A load of diversity. There's plenty of wealth here. It is concentrated in just the hands of a few. And again, diverse landscapes, as we'll see with this opening, delving into this region. Do pay attention to these dotted lines on your map here, because they're showing you the boundaries between, say, the Eurasian plate, or excuse me, the European plate and the African plate. And you'll note one of the things that's happening here is that there's nothing really crashing into Africa. Africa was at the center of Pangaea, if you think back to chapter 2 when we talked about this, at the center of Pangaea. So one unique thing you have here is no large system of mountains, especially linear, like you would find, say, with the Alps in Europe, or the Rockies in North America, or the Andes in South America. You do have some high elevations like the Ethiopian highlands, and you'll get the highest peaks here with Mount Kilimanjaro and Mount Kenya in this region right here. And you do get some mountains, but not very large. In fact, you have the Atlas Mountains up here, but we won't see those until chapter 7, and the Drakensberg right here, like the Dragon Mountains, if you will. But they're not big at all. I've been through these, and they kind of remind me of the Appalachians, so quite low. So that said, it's simply because that everything broke away from Africa and moved, say, like South America did, or North America, or Europe, or all these other continents moved away from it. So the real feature here is that it's still breaking apart, and we're going to see that just now. So if we look here at the East African Rift System, look back to chapter 2 if you need to see what a rift valley is, but that's what we're looking at here. This is the Red Sea, and then in this area right out in here going into this, the Arabian Sea. But then if you cut right through here in East Africa, you'll find all of these Great Lakes, which I'll show you here in more detail in a moment. But what you're going to find, if you could live a few million years more, that this right through here is going to cut off. It's going to break away. And just like the Red Sea is formed here, you're going to see another sea here. And you'll have a smallish continent island out here. Of course, you'll never see it in your own lifetime, but that's the way we know it's going to happen. So this is the way it's going to look, in the coming millennia. So knowing that, then, that we're dealing with a plateau continent, and that it is astride the equator, is a really important aspect. But this is a picture that a fella took with his cell phone And, a guy took a picture of him taking it, but this was a fissure of an earthquake that happened there. And so he jumps down it and takes a picture of it. So you can see this in action if you're paying attention. All right, if we look at some of these landscapes, they're varied from the Namib Desert here, which is a cold water climate coastal desert in Namibia. It's very much like the Atacama Desert is over in South America. To here's Kilimanjaro, and you still get some snow up here, but there's really no glaciers left up here anymore. One of my cousins just climbed this thing, so if you can continue to walk in one direction upward, for a few hours, you can make it to the top too. It's not a real strenuous climb. This is an overhead view of Victoria Falls, and we'll talk about it in a moment as well. And you get to see some of these watering holes and savannas. I think this is in your textbook as well. And this one is an area I explored when I was here last, called the God's Window, and it's out looking toward the Indian Ocean, but going through kind of the Drakensbergs there and looking at the different physical features that you'd find across the continent. So with those physical features stated, let's look at the climate here. So what is the latitudinal symmetry that I mean? Well, if you'll find the equator right through here, what you'll see, it's not if you folded the map from top to bottom, that is from northern hemisphere to southern hemisphere, it'll be an exactly symmetrical relationship, but it's pretty close. So you've got the rainforest right in here with no distinct wet or dry season. And then you get these savannas, these grasslands. And so when you're watching the videos on National Geographic or one of these channels showing you documentaries of the zebra, or the wildebeest, or the lions hunting, or whatever it is, this is likely where you're going to see it. A lot of it does happen out here in Tsavo and Serengeti. This is Kenya and Tanzania. A lot of that from here. But if you were to go down in this area right through here, like this spot right here, it's called Kruger National Park. So when you get out of the savanna, you get into a desert, but this is what they call the bush, or the bushveld in this area. So you get to see all those same kinds of animals. They're just harder to see because there's actually more vegetation here than just the grasslands and a few acacia trees out there. Do note that you do have a monsoon area over here, and we'll talk about the Harmattan winds in a moment. But then you get into the B-type climate. So the BS, you're going to get here, the BS is where you can actually still do some farming if you have access to water, like with the Niger River here, or the Kalahari, excuse me, not in the Kalahari, but with Okavango, and we'll look at the Okavango Delta here in a moment too. But also so you can grow things here, but mostly what you'll see is animal husbandry, that is with the livestock of cattle and goats and those kinds of features, because there's just not it's going to be more difficult to grow stuff up here, especially away from water. You're just not going to be able to do it. And then when you get to the BW, notice the BW is a truly arid area. You see that just a little bit of rainfall is going to come at part of the year here in Mali and Timbuktu, or here at Walvis Bay in Namibia, virtually nothing because it's that cold water desert I mentioned. So you're not going to do anything in these areas to speak of because just the climate's too dry. Now, the best part of Africa, climatically speaking, is going to be the north part, which is near the Mediterranean, and that's what these regions are largely named up here in the north, and in the south, where you get a marine west coast or Mediterranean, as you'd see right here. Now, I'll try to show you some of this on Google Earth too before I wrap up, but these are the best areas and to have diversified agriculture. And then here's the highlands again for you here. All right, so let's look at this real quick. We're going to see an influence of Europeans in this area. So when you look at Victoria Falls, we'll know it's named for Queen Victoria because, well, David Livingstone came here, saw it, and named it. But there's a lot of African names that are much more interesting, if you ask me, and much more descriptive. So what do the locals call it? That is the Victoria Falls. They call it Mosa Otonya, or the smoke which thunders. And I think it's a really cool name, but when you go, as I did, and visited this area, you see a white guy, and that's what white guys typically do, especially from the British Empire. They take they discover a place and they put their name on it. So we're going to see this in a later lecture where we're going to see a huge influence of Europeans in Africa, and it's going to be very problematic, of course. All right. When we look around here, these lakes, of course, have to do with that East African rift system, and you'll get Lake Tanganyika right here is the second deepest lake in the world, after Lake Baikal out in Russia, and so this shows you the fissures that are developing here that are going to eventually separate this out. The rivers are pretty important here too. The Congo is very difficult. It's kind of like the Amazon River. It's hard to develop it when it's on the equator with a lot of rainfall, so you're not going to see a lot of barge and river traffic just because it's not so developed in that area. But some of these other rivers you will see, like the Niger River in West Africa, or the Blue and the White Nile in the northern part here. So when you start to look up at the river starts here in Lake Victoria, that is with the Nile, and the White Nile goes north. And then if you go into Ethiopia, you can find the Blue Nile. And then if you look at Khartoum, the capital of Sudan, that's where the confluence of those two rivers are. And then you have the Zambezi down here in the south, and that's where you'd find the Victoria Falls. We'll look at soils and agriculture a bit later, but knowing that it's very difficult here because of the age of the soils and the tropical setting makes that difficult. You do have some other lakes here too, like Lake Chad, which is not in this region. It's actually well up here on this map, up to the north and the west, but it's not very big. This is in Tehrik Lake, which is internal drainage, and it's actually pretty dry out here now, so this lake is not very large at all. In fact, it's kind of shrinking. Want to introduce you to a woman here, one of my favorite environmentalists, and her name is Wangari Maathai. So if you look on page 181 and take a look at the reforestation efforts in this discussion, you'll see her name here, Wangari Maathai, and the Green Belt movement. And so this female wanted the women who stayed home to farm and keep their communities while men went away to work in mines or driving or agriculture, whatever it was, that it was important to hold the soil in place. And so planting trees became a huge campaign for her. And we see that these environmental efforts are starting to have a big impact in changing Africa. So we've seen that in this region here, and certainly throughout the Sahelian region, where they're working on this thing called the Great Green Wall. Now, the Sahel is that kind of border region between truly desert and dry lands, but the Great Green Wall is what they're building across this. So this is what it would look like before, and then the planting of trees helps retain moisture and drive away some of the aridity of the atmosphere, and also help with the agriculture. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and stop here and then pick up, because these videos have to be less than 15 minutes. So I'm going to fire up the next one and I'll just finish up. It'll only be a few minutes though. Okay, so look for part 2. Bye.